Hi again then guys, and welcome to another review from, of course, the lineup of vehicles from the 1.28 update, and this is one which is a fan favourite for sure, in a similar way to the NSX as well, a JDM icon. Personally, to get my thoughts out there initially from purely the subjective point of view, before I go into the objective, this car's never been one of my favourites as far as imports go. A lot of them I have a lot of love for. I love the Skyline, generally speaking, the R33 and 34 in particular. I love the RX-7, I love the Integra, the NSX is a legend for a reason, etc. This one, I get why people like it, but in a similar way to the Silvia, I like it, but I don't necessarily love it. I'm not much of a drift head, whereas the Silvia, of course, has a lot of that lineage to it. And the 300ZX, although it's not a pure drifter, really, it's certainly drift ready, that's for sure, in the game. But the way that I would describe the 300ZX is kind of more like the Supra form of import, where it's this large capacity, rear engine, straight line missile. Very similar to a Supra, it's very technologically advanced for its time. There's like 6 onboard ECUs or something like that, if I recall correctly. And in terms of its ability in the game, that's one of the reasons why I'm not so much of a fan of it, because it's always just felt to me, in any Gran Turismo game, that it's a pure top-end monster. And that's pretty much it. Off the line, it's okay. It's got so much wheel spin that it can be beaten by tons of other vehicles, even ones with less power. And in terms of handling, again, just like the Supra when you fully tune it, it's not that it's bad, it's just, it's almost too playful for its own good, and it can consequently be beaten once again by far less powerful cars pretty easily. Now, with that being said, in this video, you can see me running mine with around 800 horsepower on sports tyres against cars with around 1,000 horsepower, like the LaFerrari. So the potential is definitely there. It goes without saying, it's a very fast car. Even here at Fuji, the speeds, if I recall from the replay, are something like 210, 220 miles per hour. So slow it is not. The problem is, a car like this feels at home on circuits where you can actually use that. And there aren't that many in the world of GT sports, certainly not as many as there used to be. We've got Fuji now, you've got Le Mans, of course, and you've got Tokyo. Those are the 3 in particular, and you could say the Nordschleife to some degree, but not really. It's a very technical circuit and you've only got the straight at the end. Whereas in the past of the franchise, I'm not even just talking about Route X. You had tracks like Route 7 as well, which have great straights. You've got special stage Route 5 with a great straight section. Various others too, where you can actually open the car up and really use that top end power. Whereas now, it just doesn't feel like you can get the most out of it most of the time. Now, that's not to say that it's a bad car, not by any means. Earlier on today, of course, I did a tune for it in N300, and that is my primary advice when it comes to this car. If you want to run the 300ZX competitively, which most of us probably will if you're going to use it at all, then I'd recommend keeping the power low, because those are the circumstances where you get 2 main advantages. One of those advantages is that the car itself doesn't have to cope with as much power and torque, so it reduces wheel spin, makes it less tail happy, etc. But the second thing is that the car is more useful in lower levels. Now, that depends. It depends on the track, because it's a very useful car for higher classes, but only on tracks where you can use the top end speed, as I said earlier. But generally, as I also said, you can't use that most of the time. So under those circumstances, say a technical course, Dragon Trail, Lake Maggiore, various places like that, that is where I'd recommend keeping it down to like N300, N400, because it feels just better, I would say. In the top levels, anything but racing tyres, and you're going to be shredding them constantly through all of the corners. Fast, yes. Playful, too much. And in a race, you don't want a car that's playful. You want a vehicle that just gets the job done. And this one can easily be outran by cars with 200, 300, 400 horsepower less. If you compare this with 800 horsepower to something like an N400 Porsche 911, well, the Porsche, as the name suggests, or as the class suggests, has roughly half the power, but it's going to wipe the floor with this car, because it just doesn't have the cornering to compete with something like the Porsche. And it's not just that, other ones too, Skylines, GTRs in general, even something like a Supra could probably outrun it. So for me, it's not that I dislike the 300ZX as a vehicle, I just think it's a very, very specialised car when it comes to what it's best at. It's pretty good for top-end drag, great for top speed, especially for its power, and it's a pretty good drifter as well. It's certainly very tail-happy. Apart from those three specific things, it's got a lot of drawbacks. It plays around a lot, it gets its tail out a lot, even with the lower power, and it's so heavy, it's so packed full of tech. It's a 1510 kilo car to begin with, which doesn't sound that bad, but for a car that's only got 276 horsepower, that means the horsepower per tonne is 183. That doesn't sound very good. That's like hot hatch territory. But with all of that under consideration, I'm not saying that you shouldn't buy this car. It has its uses, for sure. It's a very fun car for a start, and it's the kind of thing that if you want to use it as a multi-purpose vehicle, it does have that potential. For instance, it's so cheap at like 40 grand or just under that you can quite easily afford to buy maybe 2 or 3 of them and have each one built for something different. Or, of course, you could just do multiple tune setups on each one, but for instance, you could have one as an N300 circuit car, then you could have one with like a 600 or 700 horsepower drift tune, and then you could have one tuned for, say, 230 mile per hour Le Mans drag racing, or even Le Mans circuit racing. So it has that potential. It's not that you can't use it, it's that it's just one of those vehicles that you have to choose carefully where you do use it, otherwise you will find yourself either at the back of the pack or putting in a ridiculous amount of effort basically to get the same victories that cars with much less power can easily do because they're just better track cars. But of course, at the end of the day, this isn't really a track car anyway. It's more of a long distance kind of import car with more luxury, more tech, and the fact that it has a more tail-happy layout with the front engine rear-wheel drive, it's a pretty torquey motor as well with 286 pound-feet, more torque than power in other words. It makes sense that it's not the most nimble thing in the world around a track. Overall, if you do decide to use it, it has its uses, but overall, be careful where and when you do choose to. It's a fantastic car under the right circumstances, but if you use it under the wrong circumstance or tune it slightly off, you will know about it. The car will let you know immediately, because even just putting the power down in a straight line will be a challenge, even with traction control turned on. But overall, that's it for this particular review, and if you are having trouble with it as a track car in particular in terms of the handling, then you might want to click through here on screen at the end of the video to check out my tune setup that I did for it earlier today. But that's it for this review overall. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.